A cemetery worker was closing up for the night when she heard a car pull in. A well-dressed man staggered toward an unmarked grave, drinking heavily before suddenly collapsing. His head struck the tombstone and blood streamed down his face. She rushed to him, checked his pulse, called 911, and did everything she could to keep him alive. What she didn't know was that this dying stranger was her long-lost nephew, the boy she had spent 25 years searching for. And when the truth finally came to light, both of their lives changed forever. Before we continue, tell us what time it is and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. November 25, 2025. 7 o'clock in the evening. Oakwood Cemetery, Memphis, Tennessee. Grace Williams stood at the iron gates, keys in hand, ready to lock up for the night. The air had that sharp bite that comes right before winter really settles in. She pulled her coat tighter and looked back across the grounds one more time. 8 years she'd worked here as a groundskeeper. 8 years of tending to the sleeping, as she liked to think of it. She was 58 years old now, but her hands were still strong from her 20 years as a nurse before this. Some folks thought it strange, trading the living for the dead. But Grace knew better. This wasn't about death. It was about memory, about keeping promises. Her feet carried her along the familiar path through Section C, past the old oaks that had stood here longer than anyone could remember. She stopped at a simple granite stone. Catherine Ann Pierce, 1964 to 2000. Beloved mother and sister. Good night, Katie, Grace whispered, bending to place a fresh white rose against the marker. She did this every week, had done it for 25 years. I miss you, sister. The word sister came out soft, private. Nobody knew that word belonged to them. A white woman and a black woman, growing up as sisters in 1970s Memphis, some things you kept close to your heart. Grace walked a few more steps to another grave. This one had no name carved in stone, just a number assigned by the county. John Doe number 247. Rest well, Tommy, she said quietly. She knew who rested here. Thomas Michael Pierce, Catherine's husband. A good man once, broken by grief and bottles. Grace had found him 3 years ago, homeless and sleeping rough right here in this cemetery, trying to freeze himself to death 20 feet from his wife's grave. She'd taken him in, fed him, gave him a warm place to sleep for 15 months before his heart finally gave out in March of 2023. He died holding her hand, whispering apologies to people who weren't there. The sound of an engine pulled Grace from her thoughts. Headlights swept across the darkening grounds. She frowned. Cemetery was closed. She walked toward the entrance and saw a black Tesla pull through the gates before she could lock them. The car rolled slowly down the path and stopped right in front of John Doe 247's grave. Grace hung back by the oak tree, watching. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Even in the dim light from the old cemetery lamps, Grace could see he was young, maybe mid-30s. He wore an expensive suit, the kind that costs more than most people make in a month, but it was wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. He reached back into the car and pulled out a bottle. The distinctive round shape caught what little light there was. Bourbon. The expensive kind. Grace watched him walk to Thomas's grave and drop to his knees. He uncapped the bottle and drank straight from it. His shoulders shook. Then she heard his voice, rough and breaking. Why, old man, why did you have to die like this? He drank again, deeper this time. His body swayed. Grace knew the signs. 20 years as an ER nurse taught you when someone was past their limit. She started walking toward him. Sir, are you? He turned his head toward her voice, eyes unfocused, and that's when his body went slack. He toppled sideways and his head cracked against the corner of the granite marker with a sound that made Grace's stomach drop. The bottle shattered on the ground. Blood immediately started running down his face. Grace ran. Her knees weren't what they used to be, but she covered that ground fast. She dropped beside him, her fingers going to his neck. Pulse was there but weak. His breathing was shallow. The smell of bourbon was overwhelming. Sir, can you hear me? She pulled out her phone, dialed 911 with shaking fingers. Yes, I need an ambulance at Oakwood Cemetery, Section C. Male, approximately 35 years old, head trauma and possible alcohol poisoning. She kept her hand on his pulse while she talked to the dispatcher, then used her scarf to press against the bleeding gash on his temple. Her other hand tilted his head to the side. If he got sick, she didn't want him choking. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. 2 EMTs jumped out with their bags and a stretcher. "Do you know this man, ma'am?" the first EMT asked as they worked. Grace spotted a wallet on the ground where it must have fallen from his pocket. She opened it carefully. Tennessee driver's license. Jonathan Pierce, 35 years old. The name Pierce didn't register anything in her mind. It was common enough in Memphis. She'd known 3 different Pierce families just in her nursing days. "Good thing you found him," the second EMT said as they lifted Jonathan onto the stretcher. "Another hour out here in this cold with that much alcohol in his system, will he be okay?" Grace asked. "Alcohol poisoning for sure, possible concussion. We're taking him to Memphis General. You probably saved his life, ma'am." They loaded him into the ambulance, lights spinning red and blue across the quiet cemetery. Grace stood there holding his wallet, watching the ambulance pull away. She set the wallet on top of Thomas's headstone where someone would find it, then looked down at the grave. John Doe number 247. Thomas Pierce. Jonathan Pierce. "Who was that man?" she whispered to the darkness. "Why was he visiting you, Tommy?" She noticed tire tracks in the damp earth near the grave. Old tracks, worn in by multiple visits. This wasn't his first time here. She bent down and picked up the broken bottle neck. The label said Blanton's. She knew that name. $200 a bottle. A receipt had fallen from his suit jacket. She picked it up. Purchased today at a liquor store in downtown Memphis. Someone wealthy, someone in pain, someone visiting a nameless homeless man's grave and drinking himself unconscious. Grace stood there a long moment, curious but exhausted. She was too tired to puzzle it out tonight. She locked the gates behind her and drove home to her small house in Cooper Young. In her bedroom she opened the bottom drawer of her dresser and pulled out a photo album she kept hidden under old sweaters. Her hands knew every page by heart. First photo, a white woman with kind eyes holding a black baby. Eleanor Pierce and baby Grace, 1967. Next photo, 2 teenage girls, one white and one black, arms around each other laughing. Catherine and Grace, 1979. Next Catherine, pregnant and glowing, with Grace standing beside her, 1990. Next a newborn baby in Grace's arms. Baby Jonathan just hours old. Next a little boy, maybe 5 years old, holding Grace's hand. The back of the photo said, Jonathan and Aunt Gracie 1995. Last photo, Jonathan at 10 years old, gap-toothed smile, messy hair. The last time Grace had seen him, she touched the photo with one finger. "You'd be 35 now, baby. 25 years. Catherine died when Jonathan was 10, and his father's mother, Maria, had taken him away to Nashville. Grace had tried to find him. Letters returned unopened. Phone calls unanswered. Eventually she'd hired a private investigator and learned he'd gone to MIT, then started some kind of tech company. He was successful. He was alive. That had to be enough. "Katie, I'm sorry," Grace whispered to the photo. "I lost track of your boy after Maria took him. I've been searching for 25 years. She closed the album and put it back in its hiding place. Grace had no idea that the man she'd just saved was the very person she'd been looking for all this time. 1 week later, December 2nd, late morning, Jonathan Pierce sat in his Tesla outside the cemetery gates, engine running, heat on. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel. His head still ached a little from the stitches, and the doctor had lectured him for 30 minutes about alcohol poisoning and liver damage and making better choices. He should go in. He should thank the woman who'd saved his life. The hospital had told him a cemetery worker named Grace Williams had called 911 and stayed with him until help arrived. But if he thanked her, she'd want to talk. She'd ask questions, and if she knew who he was, if she knew he was Catherine Pierce's son, he could already hear it, the judgment in people's voices. "Where were you for 15 years? Why didn't you visit your mother's grave? Why did you let your father die alone and homeless?" everyone asked. The handful of old family friends who'd tracked him down over the years. The reporters who dug up his past when his company went public. His therapist. His board members who thought his personal issues were affecting his focus. Even he asked himself those questions every single night. Better to be no one, just John. A stranger she helped once. Someone who says thank you and walks away. He turned off the engine and got out, carrying 2 bouquets of white roses, his mother's favorite. The cemetery was quiet in the thin December sunlight. He walked to Section C, to the 2 graves that held what was left of his family. Catherine Ann Pierce. He laid the roses against her stone. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, 25 years of sorry. It never felt like enough." He moved to the unmarked grave beside hers and laid down the second bouquet. "I should have looked for you, Dad. I should have tried." The guilt sat in his chest like a stone. 15 years old, running away to Nashville with Grandma Maria because he couldn't stand watching his father drink himself to death. And then never calling, never checking, just telling himself his father didn't want to hear from him anyway. "Mr. Pierce." Jonathan's head snapped up. A woman stood about 20 feet away, pruning shears in hand, wearing work gloves and a canvas jacket. She was black, maybe late 50s, with gray threading through her short natural hair. Her face was kind. "You're the man from last week," she said, walking closer. Jonathan stood up quickly. "Yes, I wanted to thank you. You saved my life." She stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm glad you're all right. I'm Grace Williams. I work here." Jonathan hesitated for just a second too long. "I'm John." Grace smiled a little. "Nice to meet you properly, John. How are you feeling?" "Better. Thanks to you." He shoved his hands in his pockets. I should go. Take care of yourself, John." He walked away, feeling the lies sitting heavy on his tongue. That evening, Jonathan stood in his penthouse apartment downtown. 5,000 square feet of glass and steel and expensive furniture that somehow still felt empty. He poured himself a whiskey, then stared at it and poured it down the sink. He'd lived alone since he was 15 years old. Even at MIT, surrounded by thousands of students, he'd been alone. No friends really, no one who knew him past the surface. He'd taught himself that was safer. Can't be abandoned if you never let anyone close. He thought about his father. Thought about that last fight before he'd left. 15-year-old Jonathan standing in their small house in Memphis, bottles everywhere, trying to clean up while his father lay passed out on the couch. Again. "Dad, please. You have to eat something." Thomas had opened his eyes, unfocused, and read, "Your mother, she's gone because of me." "That's not true. Mom died because she was sick. I couldn't save her. I'm useless." Thomas reached for another bottle. "You're making excuses to drink." Jonathan had been crying, furious and heartbroken all at once. "I can't do this anymore." Thomas had thrown the bottle. It shattered against the wall, inches from Jonathan's head. "Get out. You look just like her. I can't look at you. I hate you. I wish you were dead instead of her." Jonathan had run out and called Grandma Maria. She'd driven up from Nashville that same night and taken him home with her. He'd never gone back. Now Jonathan stood in his empty penthouse and let himself remember Maria's apartment in Nashville. Small, clean, strict. "Your father is weak," Maria had told him on that first night. "You forget about him. You focus on school. You make something of yourself. But what if he needs help? He made his choices. Don't become like him." So Jonathan had buried himself in books and computers. He'd gotten a scholarship to MIT, started a tech company, made billions, proved he wasn't like his father, but he'd also spent Christmas breaks alone in his dorm room after Maria died. Spent every holiday for the past 20 years by himself. Built a company full of employees who respected him but didn't know him. He pulled out the card the hospital had given him. Grace Williams, Oakwood Cemetery. She didn't ask anything, he said to the empty room. Didn't judge, just helped. 3 days later Jonathan returned to the cemetery carrying 2 cups of coffee. He found Grace trimming bushes near his mother's grave. "Hi Grace," he held out one of the cups. "I brought coffee, to say thank you." Grace looked surprised but pleased. "That's very thoughtful, John." They sat on a bench nearby. Jonathan had no idea they were sitting 20 feet from his mother's grave. "Do you come here often?" Grace asked. "Yes. To visit people important to me. Family. My mother, and my father, I think." Grace waited, not pushing. "It's complicated," Jonathan continued. "We were estranged. He died before I could—" His voice broke. He couldn't finish the sentence. Grace's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry. That must be very hard. I made mistakes, big ones, and now I can't fix them." "We all make mistakes, John. That's being human." He looked at her. "You don't even know me. Why are you kind?" "Because everyone deserves kindness. Especially people carrying pain." Something in Jonathan's chest loosened just a little. For the first time in years someone saw him hurting and didn't ask him to explain it or defend it or get over it. They just sat with him in it. He started coming back. 2 or 3 times a week, always brought something. Coffee or pastries or flowers for Grace's workstations. They'd talk about safe things. Memphis weather, cemetery history, the cardinals that nested in the oak trees. Grace seemed to enjoy the company. She'd laugh at his awkward jokes, tell him stories about her nursing days. Never pushed him to explain who he was or why he came. Jonathan found himself relaxing bit by bit, found himself looking forward to those visits, found himself feeling less alone. Neither of them knew the truth about the other. Not yet. 2 weeks into December, morning frost on the grass. Grace was planting winter pansies near the maintenance shed when she saw John's black Tesla pull through the gates. She'd started to recognize the sound of his engine. She watched him park in the same spot he always did, near Section C, watched him walk the same path toward the same 2 graves. She'd noticed this pattern, but today curiosity got the better of her. Grace stayed back, moving slowly between the headstones like she was checking for maintenance issues. She kept trees between them. She wasn't proud of following him, but something had been nagging at her for days. John stopped at 2 graves, side by side. Even from 30 feet away, Grace knew those markers. She'd tended them for years. Catherine Ann Pierce. John Doe number 247. Grace's breath caught in her throat. Her hand went to her chest. He was visiting Katie's grave, and Tommy's. She watched him kneel down, watched him trace his fingers over Catherine's name, watched him set white roses on both graves. Grace backed away quietly and went to the office, her mind racing. Over the next week, Grace started noticing other things. The watch on John's wrist. She'd seen enough wealthy patients in her nursing days to recognize a Patek Philippe, $80,000, probably more. His car, a Tesla Model S Plaid. She'd looked it up on her phone one night. $120,000. His suits, definitely custom made. The way they fit, the fabric, the stitching. Then one afternoon, his phone rang while they were sitting together. She heard him answer Mr. Pierce, the board meeting. He'd hung up quickly, tension in his shoulders. Mr. Pierce. Another day they'd been discussing the old mausoleums in the historic section. "When I was at MIT studying computer science," John said, "we analyzed cemetery architecture as part of a data structures class. The way information is organized and retrieved." MIT. Grace raised her eyebrows. "That's impressive." He'd caught himself. "I mean, I went there briefly, then changed the subject fast." Grace filed it away. One afternoon in late December they were talking about Christmas memories. "My mom loved white roses," John said quietly. "She'd fill the house with them. Even in winter she'd find a way." "She sounds lovely. Where is she now?" "She died when I was 10. Breast cancer." Grace did the math in her head. Catherine had died 25 years ago. From breast cancer, when her son would have been 10. A few days later, Grace asked casually, "How old are you, John?" 35. Catherine's son would be 35 now. That night, Grace sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, turning it all over in her mind. John could be short for Jonathan. 35 years old. Same age as Katie's boy. Visiting Katie's and Tommy's graves. Last name Pierce. Went to MIT. Jonathan had gone to MIT. She'd found that out years ago from her private investigator. Tech company CEO, the phone call, Mr. Pierce, the board meeting. "Oh, Katie," Grace whispered. "Is it him? Is it really him?" She had to know for sure. The next morning, Grace went to the cemetery office before her shift started. She pulled Catherine Pierce's file from the old filing cabinets. Catherine Ann Pierce, born 1964, died 2000, cause of death, breast cancer. Survived by husband Thomas Michael Pierce, and son Jonathan Michael Pierce, age 10. Son relocated to Nashville, Tennessee with paternal grandmother Maria Lopez. Grace sat back in the old desk chair staring at the name, Jonathan Michael Pierce. She pulled the John Doe file next. Found March 2023, died of hypothermia and heart failure. Dental records matched, Thomas Michael Pierce, born 1962, no family contacted. Listed as estranged from son. Grace drove home that afternoon with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. At home she opened the hidden box and pulled out her photos. Baby Jonathan with his chubby cheeks and bright eyes. Jonathan at 10, the last time she'd seen him. She held that photo up and thought about John's face, the eyes, the gentle way he moved, the way he tilted his head when he listened. "It's him," she said out loud. "Katie's baby, my nephew, he's been here all along." But why was he hiding? Why was he lying about his name? Grace sat in her living room as the winter sun set, thinking about what to do. She could tell him straight out, "I know who you are." But that might scare him away. He was hiding for a reason. She could wait for him to tell her on his own. But what if he never felt safe enough? She could reveal her own identity first, but that might overwhelm him. Grace thought about Catherine's last days, morphine and pain and cancer eating her up from the inside. Grace had been her hospice nurse, had held her hand through the worst of it. "Gracie," Catherine had whispered 2 days before she died, "promise me you'll watch over Jonathan and Tommy. If they get lost, you bring them back." "I promise, Katie, I promise. But don't force it, let them come to you. Let them choose." Grace closed her eyes. "Okay, Katie, I'll wait. I'll be patient." But she started dropping small hints. One afternoon, sitting on their bench, Grace said, "You remind me of someone I used to know, John. Yeah, you have a kind heart, like someone very special to me." Another day, "I lost someone 25 years ago. Someone like a son to me." John listened but never made the connection. He was too wrapped up in his own guilt to see clearly. Grace decided she'd wait for the right moment, even if it took months. Even if it took years. She'd already waited 25 years. She could wait a little longer. Early January, 2026, a month since they'd met. Grace was sweeping leaves off the pathway when John walked up carrying a white bakery box. "Morning, Grace." "Morning, John. What's that?" "Beignets from Arcade Restaurant. Have you had breakfast?" She laughed. "Trying to fatten me up. Just trying to say thank you." Again. They sat on the bench and ate powdered sugar-covered beignets, making a mess and not caring. "Grace," John said, wiping sugar off his fingers, "would you want to have dinner sometime? Real dinner, not cemetery bench picnics." Grace studied his face. He looked nervous, like a kid asking for permission. "I make a mean fried chicken," she said, "Southern style. You could come by my place tomorrow night if you want." "I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing, John. I'd enjoy the company." The next evening, Jonathan showed up at Grace's small house in Cooper Young at 6 o'clock sharp. He carried a bottle of wine, and a bouquet of flowers. Grace opened the door, and the smell of fried chicken and collard greens rolled out into the cold January air. "Come in, come in. Don't let the heat out." Jonathan stepped inside and stopped. The house was small but warm, cozy, lived in. Photos on every wall. A quilt draped over the couch, books on shelves, plants in windows. "This smells exactly like," he stopped, swallowing hard, "like home. A long time ago." Grace took his coat. "Your mother cooked like this?" "Yes, before she got sick. Sunday dinners were." He couldn't finish. "It's okay, we can talk about something else." "No, it's nice to remember the good times." They ate at the small kitchen table. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread with butter. Jonathan ate like he'd forgotten what real food tasted like. "This is incredible," he said. "My mama taught me, Well, the woman who raised me. She wasn't my mama by blood, but she was my mama in every way that counted. After dinner, Grace made peach cobbler and coffee, and they moved to the living room. Jonathan looked at the photos on the walls. One photo showed a white woman with kind eyes holding a young black girl. That's a beautiful photo, Jonathan said. Your mother, Eleanor Pierce, she adopted me, informally anyway, back in 1967. Such things weren't exactly legal, but she did it anyway. Jonathan looked closer. Pierce, that's my last name too. Grace's voice was careful. It's common around here. She was a wonderful woman, chose love over fear. What do you mean? 1967, Memphis, white woman raising a black baby. It wasn't easy. People had opinions, strong ones, but she did it anyway. Grace sat down with her coffee. She taught me that family is about choice, not blood. Jonathan sat beside her on the couch, holding that thought. You mentioned losing someone, he said quietly. Someone like a son. Grace chose her words carefully. Yes, someone very precious. 25 years ago. Can I ask what happened? His mother died. She was like a sister to me. Closer than blood, really. The family took him away after she passed. I tried to find him, but, her voice broke just a little. I lost track of him. I'm so sorry, Grace. Do you have photos of them? I do, but they're too painful to display. I keep them in a box, looking at them. It's like losing them all over again. Jonathan understood that. I'm the same with my mom. I have photos but they're packed away. Looking at her face, remembering what I lost, he shook his head. It's too much. Maybe someday we'll both be strong enough. Maybe, but not today. They sat quietly for a moment. Two people carrying the same shape of grief. Grace, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you work at the cemetery? After being a nurse, you could do anything. Grace smiled sadly. Because the people I love most are there. My mother Eleanor, my sister, and someone else very important to me. I go to work every day and I'm close to them. It brings me peace. I understand that. I feel the same, coming to the cemetery. It's the only place I feel close to my parents. Grace reached over and squeezed his hand. They'd be proud of you, John. Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. You don't even know me. How can you say that? Because you're here. You came back. That takes courage. Jonathan almost broke, almost told her everything. The words were right there on his tongue. I'm not John. I'm Jonathan. I'm Catherine Pierce's son. I'm the boy you lost. But fear held him back. What if she hated him for lying? What if she asked why he'd abandoned his father? He couldn't risk it. Not yet. He left that night feeling more connected than he had in 20 years, but still hiding. Late January, a cold Tuesday night. After Jonathan left, Grace sat alone in her quiet house. She knew, she was absolutely certain now. John was Jonathan, her nephew, Katie's boy, the baby she'd held, the child she'd lost, the man she'd been searching for. She went to her bedroom and opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the hidden box, looked at the photos of young Jonathan. You've grown into such a beautiful soul, baby, she whispered to the picture. But you're hurting, carrying so much guilt, just like your daddy did. Grace had been a nurse for 20 years. She knew healing took time, knew you couldn't rush trust, but she also knew she needed to organize her thoughts, needed to be ready for when the moment came. She pulled out paper and a pen, and started writing. The letter took her 3 hours. She wrote and crossed out and rewrote, cried through parts of it, smiled through others, poured out 25 years of searching and grieving and loving. When she finished, her hand was cramped and her heart felt raw and open. She read it over once, tears streaming down her face. My dearest Jonathan, I'm writing this letter even though I don't know when, or if, I'll ever give it to you. But I need to put these words down. I need you to know the truth, even if you're not ready to hear it yet. I know who you are, baby. I've known for weeks. You're not John. You're Jonathan Michael Pierce, Catherine's son, my nephew, the baby boy I held in my arms 35 years ago. I recognized you not by your face, but by your heart. The way you grieve, the way you carry guilt that isn't yours to carry. You're so much like your mama, so much like your daddy too. You're wondering why I haven't said anything, why I let you keep pretending. Baby, it's because I understand.
I know what it's like to hide. I know what it's like to be afraid of judgment. Your mama and I had to hide our relationship for years, because society said a white woman and a black woman couldn't be sisters. We loved each other anyway, but we hid it to protect her marriage, her life, her son. You, Catherine, was more than my patient when she was dying. She was my sister. We grew up together, raised by Eleanor Pierce, your grandmother. Eleanor adopted me when my birth mother died, back in 1967, when such things were impossible. But Eleanor didn't care about impossible. She chose love, just like Katie chose love when she made me promise to watch over you. 2 days before she died, your mama held my hand and said, "Gracie, if my boys get lost, you find them, you bring them home." I tried, baby. God knows I tried. After Katie passed, I went to your house 3 times. Your father was drowning in bottles, pushing everyone away. The 4th time, you were gone. Maria had taken you to Nashville. I called, I wrote letters. Maria sent them back unopened. She told me to stay away from her grandson. She said I was that black woman who filled Catherine's head with nonsense.
I hired investigators. I tracked you to Nashville, then MIT, then your company. I watched you grow up through newspaper articles and Forbes covers. I was so proud, Jonathan, so incredibly proud. But I didn't reach out. You seemed successful, seemed like you'd moved on. I thought maybe it was better if you didn't remember the pain. Then 3 years ago I found your father. He was homeless, sleeping in this cemetery, trying to freeze to death 20 feet from your mother's grave. I recognized him even though he'd aged 30 years. I took him in, fed him, gave him a warm place to sleep. We talked about you every single night. He showed me a Forbes article about you. His hands shook as he pointed to your picture. "That's my boy Gracie. I ruined him, but look what he became anyway." I told him to call you, to tell you he was trying to get better. But he'd say, "Look at me. I'm nothing, he's a billionaire." What kind of father shows up like this? He died believing you hated him, Jonathan, but his last words were, "Tell my boy I'm sorry. Tell him I love him." And now here you are, collapsed at your father's grave, lost, broken, punishing yourself. Just like Tommy did, just like Katie feared you would. Baby, you have to stop. You didn't kill your mother. Cancer did. You didn't abandon your father. He pushed you away. You were a child, 15 years old. You survived the only way you knew how. Your mama didn't want you to spend your life in guilt. She wanted you to be happy, to be free, to love and be loved. That's why I'm waiting. Why I'm letting you be John. Because you need someone who doesn't judge you. Someone who sees you, not your mistakes. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. I've been here for 25 years. I'll be here for 25 more if that's what it takes. Because I made a promise to your mama. And because I love you, Jonathan. I loved you when you were born. I loved you when you called me Aunt Gracie and held my hand. I loved you through every year I couldn't find you. And I love you now. You're not alone, baby. You've never been alone. Even when you couldn't see me, I was watching over you, praying for you, waiting for you to come home. And now you have. Take your time. Heal. Be John for as long as you need. But know this, when you're ready to be Jonathan again, I'll be right here. Your mother's sister, your father's friend, and if you'll have me, your family. Your family. All my love, Grace. P.S. You asked me once why I'm kind to strangers. Baby, you're not a stranger. You never were. You're Katie's boy. And that makes you mine too. Grace folded the letter carefully, put it in an envelope and wrote on the front, "To Jonathan, when you're ready." She placed it in the hidden box with Catherine's photos and closed the drawer. "Katie," she whispered. "I wrote him. I told him everything. When the time is right, I'll give it to him. Please guide me. Help me know when." Grace didn't know the time would come sooner than she thought. And in the worst possible way. February 15, 2026, a Thursday morning. Grace woke up with a headache. Not unusual, she'd had headaches before. But this one felt different. Pressure behind her eyes. Her left arm tingled when she reached for her phone. "Just stress," she muttered. Getting out of bed. "I'll take some aspirin." She went through her morning routine, but the headache didn't fade. Still, she had work to do. Bulbs to plant. Paths to clear. She dealt with worse. At the cemetery by 8 o'clock, Grace started planting tulip bulbs along the main pathway. The February air was cold but clear. Her left hand felt clumsy holding the trowel, but she pushed through it. Jonathan arrived at 10:30 with 2 cups of coffee, like he did most mornings now. "Morning, Grace." She looked up from the flower bed and smiled, but even that felt wrong. Like one side of her face wasn't moving right. Jonathan's smile faded. "Grace, are you feeling okay? You look pale." "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little tired. Maybe you should go home early. Rest." "I will. After I finish planting these tulips." Grace stood up slowly. The world tilted a little, but she steadied herself on a nearby headstone. They talked for 30 minutes. Jonathan seemed distracted, nervous about something. "Grace, he stopped, started again. "I want to tell you something." "Yes?" Jonathan's hands were shaking. "I'm not who you think I am." Grace's heart started pounding. "After all these weeks, what do you mean?" "My name isn't," Grace gasped. Her right hand flew to her chest. The left side of her face suddenly drooped. Her left arm went limp and the world tilted hard. "John. Ethan." Her legs gave out. "Grace. Grace." Jonathan caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her carefully onto the grass. Her eyes were open but unfocused. The left side of her face sagged. Her mouth moved but no words came out. "Someone call 911. Jonathan screamed. "Help, I need help." A maintenance worker 50 yards away heard him and ran for the office phone. Jonathan cradled Grace against his chest. "Stay with me. Please stay with me. Don't leave. Please don't leave." Grace's eyes found his face. She tried to speak, her words slurred and barely audible. "My boy." "What?" "Grace, save your strength. Help is coming." Her right hand lifted weakly and touched his face. Her eyes were full of tears and something else. Recognition. "Love, always, loved you." "Grace, don't say goodbye. You're going to be fine." The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later. 2 EMTs jumped out. "Are you family?" the first EMT asked as they checked Grace's vitals. Jonathan didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'm her nephew." It was the first time he'd claimed any family relationship with anyone in 20 years, and it felt like coming home. "She's having a stroke," the second EMT said. "We need to move fast." They loaded Grace onto the stretcher. Jonathan climbed into the ambulance without asking permission. "Don't leave me," he whispered, holding her hand. "Please, I just found you." Grace squeezed his hand with her right hand. "Barely, but enough." Memphis General Hospital. The same hospital where Catherine had died 25 years ago. The same hallways, the same fluorescent lights, the same smell of antiseptic and fear. They rushed Grace straight to surgery. A doctor in blue scrubs stopped Jonathan in the hallway. "Are you next of kin?" "I'm all she has. We need consent forms signed. She's having an ischemic stroke. Blood clot in the brain. We need to operate immediately." Jonathan's hands shook as he signed the forms. Jonathan Pierce, nephew. Another lie. But this time it was the truth that mattered. He was family. He'd always been family. The surgery took 5 hours. Jonathan sat alone in the waiting room. 5 hours of fluorescent lights and CNN on low volume and the smell of bad coffee and fear. He remembered sitting in this same waiting room 25 years ago. 10-year-old Jonathan in the plastic chair, legs too short to reach the floor. His father in the corner, drunk, unresponsive. A nurse, a kind black woman with gentle hands, coming through the double doors. "Jonathan, sweetheart, your mama wants to see you." He'd run down the hallway and into the hospital room where Catherine lay tiny and gray in the big white bed. "Mama, please don't go, baby. Be strong. I love you." She died holding his hand. And Thomas had screamed, had thrown everyone out of the room, had pushed the nurse away when she tried to comfort young Jonathan. That nurse had been Grace. He could see it now. That voice, that kindness. She'd tried to hold him, and his father had screamed at her to get out. That was the last time they'd seen each other. Until now. Jonathan put his head in his hands and sobbed. Great, gasping sobs that he'd been holding back for 25 years. "What if she dies?" Thinking, "I don't trust her," he whispered. "What if I lose her like I lost everyone else?" A nurse approached. "Mr. Pierce, do you want us to contact other family?" "There is no other family," His voice broke. Just me. And her. And I can't lose her. Not her too. At 3:15 in the afternoon, a doctor came through the double doors. Dr. Chen, according to her badge. Mr. Pierce. Jonathan jumped to his feet. How is she? The surgery was successful. We removed the clot, but she has significant left side paralysis. Recovery will be long. Months of rehabilitation. But she's alive. She's stable. She's in ICU now. You can see her briefly. Thank you. Jonathan's voice cracked. Thank you so much. Dr. Chen put a hand on his arm. We'll need her medical records, insurance information. Does she have a living will? I don't know. I can check her house. Please do. We'll need those documents. That evening, Jonathan drove to Grace's house. She'd given him a spare key weeks ago, in case of emergency. He'd never imagined using it like this. The house felt wrong without her in it. Too quiet. He went to her bedroom, looking for the file cabinet where she'd mentioned keeping important papers. Insurance papers, passport, social security card. Then he saw a wooden box in the bottom drawer, underneath some old sweaters. A label on top in Grace's handwriting. Catherine and Jonathan. Jonathan's hands started shaking. Why did Grace have a box with their names? He opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Catherine and Grace as teenagers, arms around each other, laughing. Baby Jonathan in Grace's arms, hours after he was born. Young Jonathan, maybe 5 years old, holding Grace's hand. On the back, Jonathan and Aunt Gracie 1995. Jonathan and Grace at the zoo, at a park. At Christmas, Catherine's hospital bracelet from the day she died. A newspaper clipping about a nurse named Grace Williams, who'd lost her baby in childbirth in 1988. And an envelope. To Jonathan, when you're ready. Jonathan sat on Grace's bed, holding the envelope with trembling hands. He opened it. Jonathan read the first line and started crying. My dearest Jonathan, I know who you are, baby. He read the whole letter, every word, twice. Each sentence hit him like a physical blow. She knew. She'd known for weeks. She'd been waiting for him for 25 years. She'd found his father, cared for him, held him as he died. His father's last words, tell my boy I'm sorry. Tell him I love him. Grace had never blamed Jonathan for anything. She just loved him. Jonathan collapsed onto the floor beside Grace's bed, the letter clutched in his hands, and sobbed like a child. She's been here all along, he gasped between sobs. She saved me twice, once as a child, once at the cemetery, and I lied to her. I hid from her. He looked at the photos scattered around him. Grace holding baby Jonathan. Grace teaching him to tie his shoes. Grace at Catherine's bedside, holding both their hands. The one person who never abandoned me, and I couldn't trust her. He picked up another photo. Grace in a hospital bed, looking devastated. The back said March 1988, after we lost Sarah Grace Williams. Another photo, Grace's wedding to a man named Marcus. Another article, local nurse loses baby in childbirth. Jonathan understood then. Grace had been married, she'd been pregnant, she'd lost her baby, then Catherine got pregnant with him, and Grace poured all her mother love into him. He wasn't just her nephew, he was the baby she couldn't have. She's been grieving me for 25 years, Jonathan whispered. He gathered the photos and the letter and drove back to the hospital. ICU visiting hours were technically over, but Jonathan begged the night nurse, please, I just found out she's my family. I need to see her. The nurse looked at his red swollen eyes and let him in. Grace lay in the hospital bed, tubes and wires everywhere. The left side of her face drooped slightly. Machines beeped steadily. She was unconscious. Jonathan pulled a chair close, and took her right hand in both of his. Grace, he whispered. Aunt Grace, I'm so sorry. Tears ran down his face and dripped onto their joined hands. I know everything now. I read your letter. I saw the photos. And I remember Aunt Gracie singing to me. I remember you holding me when Mom was sick. I remember you trying to reach me when Dad pushed you away. He couldn't stop crying. 25 years of tears. You've been looking for me all this time, and I've been hiding from you, from everyone. I was so afraid of judgment, so afraid of facing what I'd done. He lifted her hand and pressed it to his cheek. But you never judged me. You just loved me. You saved Dad when I didn't. You saved me when I was dying. And I didn't even have the courage to tell you my real name. Grace's right eye opened slightly, just a flutter. She couldn't speak, but her fingers squeezed his hand. I'm here now, Jonathan said. I'm not hiding anymore, and I'm not leaving. Never again. You kept your promise to Mom for 25 years. Now it's my turn to keep mine to you. Grace's eye closed again, but the pressure on his hand remained. Jonathan stayed there all night, holding her hand, telling her stories. About MIT, about his company, about every lonely Christmas, about every time he'd almost called her but was too afraid. I'm not afraid anymore, he whispered as dawn light started filtering through the ICU windows. I'm Jonathan, I'm your nephew, I'm Katie's boy, and I'm home. 3 months later, May 20th, 2026, Jonathan stood in what used to be the guest house behind his penthouse building. Except it wasn't a guest house anymore. He'd spent the last 3 months converting it into a full medical suite, hospital bed, physical therapy equipment, wheelchair ramp, handrails everywhere, a nurse's station with monitoring equipment, a comfortable living space with a TV and books and windows that let in natural light. Grace was coming home today. Sir, you really could have hired a professional medical facility, his assistant had said when Jonathan started this project. She's my mother, Jonathan had replied. I'm doing this myself. Yes, he called her his mother now. To everyone, the hospital staff, his employees, his board members, the board had been concerned. The CEO is missing meetings for personal matters. Jonathan had looked them straight in the eye. Then I'll step down. Family comes first. He'd meant it too. Would have walked away from the whole company if it meant taking care of Grace. In the end they'd compromised. Jonathan stepped back to chairman, brought in a new CEO and cut his hours by 75%. Now he was at the rehabilitation center, signing discharge papers while Grace finished saying goodbye to her physical therapist. Grace's recovery had been slow but steady. Her speech was about 70% clear, with just a slight slur on certain words. Her left arm was still weak but functional. She could walk with a cane. Her mind was sharp as ever, which she proved by beating Jonathan at Scrabble 3 times a week. Ready to go home? Jonathan asked, pushing her wheelchair up to the nurse's station. More than ready, Grace said. Her voice was a little slower than before but strong. 3 months in this place is enough. Well, wait until you see what home looks like now. When they pulled up to the guest house, Grace stared. Jonathan, what did you do? Made sure you'd be comfortable. He helped her out of the car and handed her the cane. Come on, let me show you. He'd thought of everything. Wide doorways for the wheelchair on bad days, handrails in the bathroom, a walk-in shower with a bench, a kitchen with lowered counters so she could cook from a seated position if she needed to. Her bedroom had windows looking out over a small garden Jonathan had planted with white roses, Catherine's favorite. Baby, this is too much, Grace said, tears in her eyes. No, it's not nearly enough. Jonathan helped her sit in the comfortable armchair by the window. You raised me twice, once as a child, once as an adult. You taught me what family really means. Let me take care of you now, please. Grace reached up and cupped his face with her right hand. When did you become such a good man? I learned from the best. The days fell into a rhythm. Jonathan woke up early and made breakfast. Then Grace's physical therapist came for an hour. Occupational therapy twice a week. Speech therapy on Wednesdays. Jonathan did all of it with her, learning the exercises, encouraging her through the hard moments. His employees were shocked. The cold, distant CEO who'd never taken a vacation was suddenly leaving at 5 o'clock every day to make dinner, was turning down business trips, was bringing his mother to the office for lunch. Your mother? His CFO had asked, confused. I didn't know you had family. Neither did I, Jonathan had said. For a long time neither did I. Grace watched Jonathan transform in front of her eyes. The scared hidden man she'd met in the cemetery was gone. In his place was someone confident, open,
connected. One afternoon in late May they were sitting in the garden. Grace was doing her hand exercises, squeezing a therapy ball over and over. "Jonathan," she said, "you don't have to do all this." "Yes I do, baby, I can hire nurses. You have a company to run." "The company is fine, and I'm not hiring nurses." He took the therapy ball from her and held both her hands. "You're my mother, I'm taking care of you. That's what family does." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I love hearing you call me that. Get used to it. You're stuck with me now. That's all I ever wanted, to be stuck with you." They sat quietly watching the white roses bloom in the warm May sunshine. 6 months after the stroke, August 15, 2026. Grace could walk without the cane most days now. Her speech was 90% back to normal. She'd started volunteering at the hospital, talking to stroke patients, giving them hope. Jonathan had stepped down even further from the company. He still served as chairman, but his real work now was with a new foundation he'd created, the Eleanor and Catherine Pierce Foundation for Chosen Families. On this particular Tuesday, Jonathan drove Grace to Oakwood Cemetery. They hadn't been back together since the day of her stroke. "Are you sure you're ready?" Jonathan asked as they walked through the gates. "I'm ready." They walked to Section C, to the 3 graves that held Jonathan's family. Except now there were 4 headstones. Grace stopped and stared. Eleanor May Pierce, 1940 to 1982. She chose love over fear. Catherine Ann Pierce, 1964 to 2000. Sister Mother Light. Thomas Michael Pierce, 1962 to 2023. He tried, he loved, he is forgiven. And one more, empty plot, headstone ready. Grace Eleanor Williams Pierce, 1966 to blank. Mother by choice, family by love. Jonathan. "I bought the plots," he said quietly. "All of us together, where we belong." Grace couldn't speak. She just held onto his arm and cried. They stood there for a long time. Then Jonathan knelt and placed white roses on each grave. "Mom, Dad, Grandma Eleanor," he said. "I found her. I found Aunt Grace." He paused. "Actually, I need to ask her something." He turned to Grace and pulled out an envelope. "Legal papers." Grace looked confused. "What is this?" "Adoption papers." "Adoption?" "Jonathan, you're 36 years old." "I know, and I want you to adopt me. Officially, legally." Jonathan's voice shook. "I don't want you to be my aunt anymore. I want you to be my mother." Grace gasped. Her right hand covered her mouth. Jonathan kept going, the words rushing out. "You held me when I was born. You raised me for 10 years. You mourned me for 25 years. You saved my life twice. You're more my mother than anyone could be." "Jonathan, Mom gave me life, but you gave me love. Dad gave me his name, but you gave me a home." He was crying now. "Will you officially, legally be my mother? Will you let me be your son?" Grace was sobbing. "Yes, oh God, yes, I've wanted to hear you call me Mom for 35 years. Jonathan stood up and pulled her into his arms. They held each other and cried, standing between the graves of the people who'd loved them, and lost them, and brought them back together. "Katie," Grace whispered, "I kept my promise. I brought your boy home." 1 week later they stood in a courthouse downtown. Small ceremony. Just a judge and a handful of people Grace and Jonathan had invited. Some of Grace's friends from the hospital. A couple of Jonathan's employees who'd become real friends over the past months. The judge looked over the paperwork. "This is unusual. Adult adoption where the adoptee is 36 and the adoptive parent is 59. She's been my mother for 36 years, Jonathan said. "We're just making it legal." The judge smiled. "I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've never seen anything more beautiful." Adoption granted. Grace signed the papers with a shaking hand. Grace Eleanor Williams Pierce, mother of Jonathan Michael Pierce. Jonathan signed next to her. Then they held up their matching copies of the adoption decree, and took a photo together. Afterward they had a small celebration at a restaurant nearby. Grace gave a speech, her voice clear and strong. "I lost a daughter 38 years ago. Lost my nephew 25 years ago. Today I gained a son. Jonathan's speech was shorter. I lost my mother 25 years ago. Lost my father 2 years ago. Today I gained a family. They toasted to Catherine, Thomas and Eleanor. Both of them had completed their journeys. Jonathan from isolated and guilt-ridden to open and healed. Grace from grieving and searching to fulfilled and whole. They'd found each other. They'd chosen each other. And they'd made it official. Family. November 25, 2027. Exactly 2 years since Grace had found Jonathan unconscious in the cemetery. Oakwood Historic Memorial Park. Jonathan had donated $2 million to preserve it, and the city had dedicated a new memorial section in honor of his family. 4 graves in a neat row, surrounded by white rose bushes. Eleanor May Pierce. She chose love over fear. Catherine Ann Pierce. Sister Mother Light. Thomas Michael Pierce. He tried, he loved, he is forgiven. Grace Eleanor Williams Pierce. The plot empty, the headstone waiting. Mother by choice, family by love. A bench nearby with a bronze plaque, the Pierce family. 4 generations of chosen love. The dedication ceremony brought out 300 people. Donors to the foundation. Families who'd been helped by their work. Stroke survivors Grace had mentored. Foster children and adoptive parents. Jonathan stood at the podium, Grace beside him in a chair. She was 60 now, walking strong again, still with a slight limp but independent. 2 years ago, Jonathan said to the crowd, I stood at my father's grave ready to die. I was alone. I'd spent 20 years building a company, and 0 time building a life. I had everything, and I had nothing. He looked at Grace. She smiled at him. A woman I thought was a stranger saved my life that night. What I didn't know was that she wasn't a stranger at all. She was family. She'd been searching for me for 25 years. His voice broke a little, but he kept going. My grandmother Eleanor chose my mother Grace when society said no. My birth mother Catherine chose Grace as her sister when the world said impossible. Grace chose to search for me when she could have given up. My father chose at the end. To try, to be better, to love. Jonathan reached down and took Grace's hand. And I chose Grace. I chose to stop hiding. I chose to call her Mom. Because family isn't who you're born to. Family is who stays, who searches, who forgives, who chooses you, again and again. The crowd was silent. Many were crying. This memorial, Jonathan continued, honors everyone who builds family through choice. Everyone who says love matters more than blood. Everyone who refuses to give up on the people they love. Grace stood up slowly, using her cane, and joined Jonathan at the podium. In 1967, she said, her voice carrying across the crowd, a white woman named Eleanor Pierce chose to love a black baby no one wanted. She chose me. In 1982, her daughter Catherine chose to call me sister when society said we couldn't be family. In 1990, Catherine let me be part of her son's life. She chose to share her baby with me. In 2000, Catherine made me promise to watch over her husband and son. She chose to trust me with her greatest treasures. In 2023, I found Thomas Pierce dying and homeless. I chose to care for him like the brother-in-law he was. In 2025, I saved a stranger without knowing he was my nephew. God chose that moment. Grace's voice grew stronger. And in 2026, Jonathan chose me. He chose to call me Mom. He chose to make me his legal mother. She squeezed Jonathan's hand. 5 generations of choosing love. Eleanor chose me. Catherine chose to keep me. Thomas chose to let me help him at the end. Jonathan chose to come home. And I chose all of them. This foundation honors every person who chooses family, who says blood doesn't matter, love does. The crowd stood and applauded. It went on for 3 full minutes. That evening, after everyone had left, Jonathan and Grace sat on their bench in the quiet cemetery. The November sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Do you ever regret it? Grace asked. The years we lost, I used to, Jonathan said. But not anymore. Those years made me who I needed to be. If I'd found you at 20, I wouldn't have appreciated you. If Dad had lived, maybe we'd still be fighting. Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to. Very wise for 37, I learned from the best. My mom. Grace squeezed his hand. I love hearing you call me that. Get used to it, you're stuck with me now. That's all I ever wanted, to be stuck with you. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over Memphis. Other families visited graves around them. Children played near the flower beds, life continuing, love persisting. Jonathan thought about the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the searching, the hiding, the finding, the choosing. He thought about Eleanor, who'd chosen to love across racial lines when it was dangerous. He thought about Catherine, who'd chosen to call Grace her sister when it was forbidden. He thought about Thomas, who tried at the end, even though he'd failed so many times before. He thought about Grace, who'd searched for 25 years and never given up. And he thought about himself, the scared boy who'd run away, the lonely man who'd built walls, the broken soul who'd almost given up, all of them choosing, all of them trying, all of them loving in the only ways they knew how. They say you can't choose your family, Jonathan said quietly. Grace looked at him. They're wrong, he agreed. The sun dropped below the horizon. The cemetery lights flickered on. Jonathan and Grace stood up together and walked toward the parking lot, their hands linked. Behind them, 4 graves, 4 generations, 4 lives that had been messy and painful and imperfect, 4 people who'd chosen love anyway. And that choice, that simple, impossible, beautiful choice, had made all the difference. December 24th, 2028, Christmas Eve. Grace's house in Cooper Young was full of life for the first time in decades. Jonathan had insisted on hosting Christmas here instead of his penthouse. This is home, he'd said, real home. The small living room was crowded with people, not just any people, family. Grace sat in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, watching it all with a full heart. Her cane leaned against the chair, mostly decorative now. At 61, she'd recovered almost completely from the stroke. Just a slight weakness in her left hand that only she noticed. Jonathan moved through the kitchen, pulling a honey-baked ham from the oven. He'd learned to cook over the past 2 years. Grace had taught him, standing beside him, guiding his hands, just like Eleanor had taught her so many years ago. Mom, is the mac and cheese ready? He called. 5 more minutes, baby, Grace called back.
Around the room sat the family they'd built. Marcus Chen, a 17-year-old who'd aged out of foster care and found the Pierce Foundation. Jonathan had mentored him for a year, then asked Grace, "What do you think about giving him a place to stay?" Now Marcus lived in the guest house and was heading to community college in January. Beside him sat the Rodriguez sisters, twins age 14, whose adoptive parents had found the foundation when they needed support. The girls came for dinner twice a month and called Grace Abuela. Near the window, Dr. Lisa Chambers, a stroke survivor Grace had mentored, talked with her husband and 2 children. They'd become close friends over the past year. And on the couch, holding hands shyly, sat Jonathan and Maya Thompson, a teacher he'd met at a foundation event 6 months ago. Grace watched them together and smiled. Jonathan was learning to let people in, learning to love without fear. "Dinner's ready," Jonathan announced. They gathered around the table that Jonathan had extended to fit everyone. 12 people pressed close, passing dishes, laughing, talking over each other. Grace looked around at all these faces. None of them related by blood, all of them family. Jonathan raised his glass. "Mom, you want to say the blessing?" Grace stood slowly. Everyone quieted. "Lord, thank you for this food. Thank you for this house. But most of all, thank you for second chances." Her voice was strong and clear. "Thank you for every person at this table who chose to be here, who chose to be family. Thank you for proving that love is always, always a choice." She looked at Jonathan, her son, her boy, the baby she'd lost and found again. "Thank you for bringing my children home." "Amen," everyone said together. As they ate and laughed and told stories, Grace felt Catherine's presence, felt Eleanor's approval, even felt Thomas's peace. 4 generations of Pierce family, all choosing love over fear, all proving that family isn't about blood or papers or last names. It's about showing up, about staying, about choosing each other, over and over again, especially when it's hard. Jonathan caught Grace's eye across the table and mouthed, "I love you, Mom." Grace smiled, tears in her eyes, and mouthed back, "I love you too, baby." Outside, snow started to fall on Memphis for the first time in 5 years. Inside, a family built by choice celebrated Christmas together. And in the cemetery across town, 4 graves rested under white roses and fresh snow. Eleanor, Catherine, Thomas, and the empty plot waiting for Grace many years from now. All of them together. All of them home. Finally, completely, perfectly home.